Hello and welcome. My name is Chris Cant with Mining Journal and Aspermont, and with me I have Rick Rule from Rule Investment Media. Rick is joining us for Mining Journal Select in London on July 1 and 2 this year, and of course will be headlining the Rule Symposium in Boca Raton, July 7 to 11. Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Chris, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me back to address your audience.
The events are relatively similar in the fact that they are both investor-centric events. They'll be looking at the trends in the commodity space. They'll be looking at opportunities. From a personal perspective, what should audiences be expecting from you when you're presenting at both the Rule Symposium and at Mining Journal Select?
I like to believe that 45 years of exposure to these markets and focus on these markets brings a certain perspective. I like to believe, too, that my message over at least the last 40 years has been if you aren't a contrarian, you're going to be a victim. So I think that I have the ability to bring a clear-eyed practicality, a clear-eyed sense of time, a clear-eyed sense of risk to natural resource investing. What you won't get from me is this sort of hysterical fear of missing out sense. You will get a much clearer focus on the fact that value is created by, as an example, the delta between price and cost. You will get, I think, a fairly clear-eyed perspective of the fact that most junior companies are uninvestable, that you have to really, truly focus. The reason that I'm excited about participating in your conference and having you participate in my conference is that the philosophical precepts behind both conferences are fairly simple. You believe, as I believe, that your exhibitors are content too. I think you believe that because your audience has told you it's true, which makes it true. And that means at your conference, the Mining Journal Select, like my conference, the exhibitors are vetted. In the case of my conference, I have to own every public company exhibitor before they're on the floor. In the case of your conference, they have to go through a rigorous examination by the journalists and by the analysts who work for Aspermont and the Mining Journal. At most conferences around the world, the qualification to be an exhibitor is a pulse and a check that cashes, usually in reverse order of importance. And the idea that the conference promoter has an allegiance to the attendee, which is demonstrated by a rigorous screening process for the exhibitors, is, I think, extraordinarily important. And it's present at both conferences. I would say that that's the chief differentiator between these conferences and most other investment conferences in the world.
Rick, you touched on the years of experience you've had as an investor, and obviously you'll share some of that wisdom. But with your investor hat on, at both events, what are you hoping to get out of the presentations, both the pitches, if you want to be as crude as to just call them pitches, and then obviously some of those more content-driven discussions around current trends?
I'm very much focused on where the rubber meets the road. I'll give you an anecdote. I had an attendee 3 or 4 years ago email me and say, Rick, the ability to follow both Robert Friedland and Ross Beatty around your exhibit floor and observe what companies they stopped to talk to, and even the ability to lurk and listen to the questions that they asked, was worth more than the price of admission. For myself, despite the fact that I work very, very hard away from conferences, the ability to sit down and have one-on-one discussions with the companies that are presenting there, where the rubber meets the road, is invaluable. But even more invaluable is the idea that I get to listen to the questions asked by other investors of those same companies. Is to me especially important. Chris, it has struck me in 50 years of doing this that from most people's perspective, the distribution of wisdom at a conference is from the dais to the floor. And that's stupid. There's one presenter. at the dais, and there's 1,000 people at the floor. Those people on the floor are in an investment conference because they're investors. They are wise. And the ability to be for 2 days or 3 days or 4 days in the company of people who add an awful lot of value, where you can borrow, pardon me, that the value that they add simply by listening is important. What I have learned myself is that the value that I get just wandering around. And by the way, at your conference, you'll see me on the floor all day, every day, with a recorder, with a notebook. I think that's critically important. I want to remind attendees to both conferences that you will get out of this precisely what you put into it. You will go to both conferences and you will be unable to absorb all of the information available to you during the time that has been allotted to you. What that means is that you have to have spent time before the conference developing a game plan for yourself in terms of how you're going to use your time most efficiently. Then you're going to have to gather lots and lots and lots of data at the conference, and you're going to have to write it down because you're not going to remember it. And then afterwards, after the conference, you're going to have to draw investment conclusions, and you're going to have to follow up with the contacts that you made at the conference, the CEOs, the IR people, the analysts, the idea that you are going to drop into the Mining Journal Select Conference and absorb all the information that's available for you to absorb in the time allotted to the conference is simply stupid. It's an expectation that can't possibly be met. You have to start working at that conference. You have to start working at my conference right now, so that you can use your time at the conference efficiently. And then after the conference, you have to continue to work so that you can employ the best possible strategies. I can't emphasize that enough.
Rick, the commodity space or the resources space this time, this year, right now, is a very different beast to what it was 12 months ago. Have you seen that reflected in investor appetites that you're speaking to and availability of capital within the sector?
I certainly have, in all regards. The feedback that I get from the subscribers to Rule Investment Media has probably quadrupled. The simple number of inbounds for ranking requests is probably triple what it was 6 months ago. Similarly, the volume of private placement offerings that come across my desk has gone up from maybe 3 or 4 a week to 20 or 30 a week. Now, most of them, now as then, are draws, pure draws. But the truth is that the volume of financing opportunities is much greater, and sadly, the terms are not so good. But certainly the interest in the natural resources space from all categories of investors, from the Ma's and Pa's, who are principally ETF speculators, all the way up to the largest institutions and mining companies in the world, is night and day different between now and 12 months ago. What that means is that investors probably get more immediate satisfaction, but they're up against a much more competitive landscape. When you go to the Mining Journal Select Conference in London this year as a capital provider, as an investor, you better have your wits about you, because you are going to be competing with other investors who weren't there last year.
Rick, that's all we've got time for this interview. But of course, you will be there in person at both Mining Journal Select in London, July 1 and 2, and the Rule Symposium in Boca Raton, July 7 to 11. Thanks very much for your time.
Always a pleasure. And for the audience, again, remember, you'll get out of it what you put into it. Absolutely, positively show up. People who don't show up will have a much more difficult time competing with you. And when you do show up, remember to compete. It's hard work that'll get you the effort, that'll get you the result that you're hoping to achieve.